Good afternoon, my iron sharpens iron family and friends. Today we are going to talk about how the court system is conducting mental health services. This is a little hard to accept, but once you look and read between the lines, you'll see it too. So before I begin, what I want to go over a little bit is kind of a layman's term or layman's way of helping you grasp the circle of things, the way it works and why. So I was thinking about, practice of law, practice of medicine, things like that. And I think that's probably the best way to articulate how this works. So if we're talking about, let's say, medicine, for example, or, anything that alters or is dangerous to one's being, physical health in different ways. If you think about the medical community, there was a time where we were just blindly letting them perform tests on animals. And if you're old enough, you'll recall a big outrage kind of occurred. I want to say it was in the 80s or something, if I remember correctly. But when we found out like makeup companies and such were conducting experiments on animals that harmed the animals, you get all this group of people that say, no, you can't do this to animals, it's cruel. And there's a trick behind all that, see? So we're like, how do we get to this point? How do we get here? Well, if you think about all these different crafts, right? The best way for me to correlate it with something that's easy to understand is like, if you think about uh, Christian principles, witchcraft and paganism were banned. No one was allowed to practice it, and it was for a good cause, good reason. And if we think about a covenant of witches, right? You have a witch who might be able to cast spells, one who may be able to create potions, and one who might be able to summons spirits or whatever. So all these different people come together to make a covenant of witches, by which causes a dangerous environment because of their superior knowledge and understanding of how these practices work. Well, it's kind of how I look at the bigger picture of things. If you think about the practice of law, it's prohibited unless you have a license. The practice of medicine is prohibited unless you have a license. So we are ultimately banning people from learning or from obtaining a higher level of knowledge in some very basic sciences that would improve our lives. So we've kind of surrendered our power in education over to the educational department, where they will determine who's worthy of learning these sciences and who's worthy of giving us expert opinions and diagnosis and so forth and so on. And this is a dependency issue because now we rely upon them to give us an honest opinion of how things work, and it's probably not for the best. So if you think about, like I said, where they are developing these medical sciences that are utilized to benefit humanity, and for many years we received the benefit of medical advancing scientifically to help people. At the time, we had no idea that they were, conducting these horrific experiments on animals, but we didn't need to know, right? Because we were accepting the benefit of the science that they had come up with after abusing these animals. Now, they allowed this to occur. And, if you think about like Monsanto, for decades, people have raised the issues that Monsanto is making people sick, causes cancer, all kinds of things. And what happens next? People bring cases into the courtrooms, and then the courtrooms always throw them out. There's always some sort of technicality where for decades, people could not get Monsanto to stop doing what they were doing, utilizing the courts. This is because the courts allowed it. So all these little technicalities, all these little rules, they are a deterrent from us stopping them from conducting the very important sciences and research studies so they can improve the outcomes of man's environment and his life. And they know for a fact that we won't like it if we know what what it entails or the consequences of these research projects. So they go ahead and they allow for a certain amount of it in order to advance science in that particular field. So now, after a few decades, all of a sudden, the court just seemingly 30 years worth of cases, and oh my gosh, Monsanto's hurting people. We need to let this guy win this lawsuit. We need to stop them. Oh my gosh, how horrible. We've been blind for 30 years. And 30 years worth of people telling us over and over and over and over again that this is unhealthy. That's not an accident, my friends. That is collateral damage. It is collateral damage to better or to advance the health and well-being of man in the future. They could care less about the people who suffer throughout the course of these projects because they're sacrificing their well-being for the well-being of future generations. And this is circular. It's in everything we do every day. Like I said, you had the, animal rights movements when they found out that these experiments were being, brutalizing animals. That went on for quite some time, even after it was exposed. In rational thought and reality, it should only take once. If we can evidence just one time that these types of cruel procedures are happening behind the scenes, why do we have to wait 30 years for a court to say, okay, that's enough. We have enough evidence after 30 years. Let's go ahead and stop this now. These are deliberate moves. People think of it as being financial incentives, and it is financially incentivized, and make no mistake. But in the end, them putting it out in public saying that this was a financially incentivized issue, we can't believe it, all these people were involved, oh my goodness, that's just to deter you from understanding that they allow for a certain percentage of cruelty, harm, damages in order to advance science. It's just the way it is. So to speculate on how long they've been doing that, I'd say forever. It's just, to me at least, it's seemingly like forever. It's not just, beginning with the American history. This has been going on a long, 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 long time. Like I said, this is why if you go back into the 1400s and, the Bible prohibited these types of practices, which is why they're like, well, let's not prohibit these type of practices. Let's just select a few people that we believe are capable of delivering these types of scientific advancements to the population. But unfortunately, when we attempt to advance science, there's always going to be damage. There's always going to be harm because we don't know something until we know it. So who cares about the harm it causes? Because it will serve the betterment of mankind for all future generations to enjoy. So I hope that helps to understand how the natural law and natural science bring us to where we are here today. So the courts are providing you with services that are designed to correct a behavioral disorderly persona, I guess you would call it. So when we receive services, they always come from who? Social services departments. Your public servants all have degrees in social services. So whether they call themselves a social worker or not is not really relevant. You'll find that a lot of them actually take courses in regards to sociology through whenever you work for government in any of these departments. So I'm just going to kind of dig into some of the definitions and such, and you be the judge and let me know if it sounds familiar to you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is substitute decision makers. Okay, if you're a substitute decision maker, it means you're a person who possesses the authority to make decisions under the powers of attorney for health care law or under the Mental Health Treatment Preference Declaration Act. When we're at the hospital, go ahead and read your hospital contracts. You will see that you have contracted with them to allow them to manage your health and financial care. Sounds innocent, but it ain't. What happens behind the scenes is now you've given them the power of attorney to make healthcare decisions for you and to manage any financial incentives that you receive because of these medical treatments you need. If you think about the grant system, that's exactly what it provides. So the United States provides you with any necessities necessary for life, right? So if you need food, you're going to go ahead and you're going to collect food stamps. And the federal government then will give you what is called a grant and aid. You never get that money in your hand. You're not getting cash to go and spend it on food. Someone is governing that for you, managing it for you. So you have to allow for them to manage your finances in the back end. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to receive the cash and disperse it to you the way is necessary. This also applies to grants and aid for child protective services, any protective services such as police protective services. When we have police who are supposed to be what we believe to be protecting us from harm, we have granted them the authority and basically ceded our power to them to defend our own selves. We no longer have the authority to defend ourselves physically. Don't take the law into your own hands. I'll call the police instead. So basically, that is a forfeiture of right to defend ourselves. And people don't think very deeply into that and how important that is, but that is exactly what's going on, which is why they're making moves to take our guns, because we've already pretty much ceded all of our authority to them, all of our power to them to provide us with defense. So why should we have to defend ourselves if we've given them that power? Now we are dependent upon them to defend us. Therefore, in trust and good faith, we're going to let them do that, and we won't do it for ourselves. Not a good idea, friends. But this is basically where we ended up today. So not going to get too deeply into that. We'll go through this more. All right. So habilitation means an effort directed toward the alleviation of developmental disability or toward increasing a person with a developmental disability's level of physical, mental, social, or economic functioning. Social or economic functioning. How do we socially function? How do we economically function? Okay, so get out of the thoughts of, psychology, meaning that you have a psychosis that has been diagnosed by a psychologist. If that has not occurred, there are other types of developmental disabilities you can have, either socially or economically. So if you have children and you would like to, or you don't want to, let's say you don't want to have children. Say it was, you're the man, you're not interested in being a dad, you're not interested in being a husband, so you'd like freedom to just go about your business. This is a intellectual disability or a disability economically, because you are demonstrating that you are not economically responsible. If you provide all of the necessities of the child financially, then this is economic, this is your economic stability being shown to the world, So you supporting your child means that you're not leaving it to the public to support the child for you. You're taking up that responsibility, and therefore you are financially responsible because you are helping the economic system by preventing further costs of the public to take care of the child. That's what it's really about. Now, this is why they apply the deadbeat dad stigma on fathers who do not pay child support. It is because now it becomes a social disability. When you have that stigma, people think of you as being a deadbeat dad, as marketed over and over again on television, That's where it comes from. The people didn't make that up. That has been marketed. So when you have that stigma, now you are going to end up getting kind of shunned from your community as being some kind of jerk. Okay, so now you have a social disability because you're not a part of the in crowd anymore. They see you as being an outcast, and being outside of that social environment means that you are not within the confines of the community's beliefs. You're different than them. So you may have a social disability. Everyone else thinks this way, except you. Something's wrong with you. So that's how that works when we talk about social and economic functionings or disabilities. Habilitation may include, but is not limited to, diagnosis, evaluation, medical services, residential care, daycare, special living arrangements, training, education, sheltered employment, protective services, counseling, and other services provided to persons with a developmental disability by developmental disability facilities. So diagnosis we think of coming from a licensed practitioner, but we never think about what is an evaluation. Evaluations are like observations. So I observe you behaving erratically. I cannot diagnose you as being anything because I don't have my license to practice medicine. But through my observation, I can evaluate that behavior and I can give it to someone with a medical degree who can take whatever I've observed about you and reported, and they can then make the diagnosis based on what I've observed. And, they're going to take my evaluation in good faith that I'm telling the truth, that perhaps what I've seen you do is act erratically. So now we have all of these different ways of describing someone as being somehow socially or economically disabled. And if you are socially or economically disabled, it also means you are therefore dependent on the education system to teach you how to get back on track socially and economically. Well, you can fix your social disability if you just start paying child support. That's a real easy fix, isn't it? Because now you won't be ousted from the community. You won't be different from the community. You won't be the one who has a different or is holding out to have a different a belief system than everybody else, than the majority. We can also cure your economic disability by forcing you to pay in to the child support and monitoring those through the child support and disbursement units. So now we can prove that you have become economically responsible and therefore are not disabled per se, but still dependent because we don't trust you, right? So if we trusted you and you were not dependent, you would be able to privately make your payments to mom directly. But since we don't trust you, you are dependent. And therefore, we will monitor those payments you make. And once that has been applied to you, that type of social behavioral service, it will now improve the outcome of your life, leading to a more happy social life, because everyone will see that you are making those payments and they will like you better. Welcome to the right to be happy. That's how it works. So hopefully that's clear. I think that that's easy to understand. So a mental health facility means any licensed private hospital, institution, or facility or section thereof, and any facility or section thereof operated by the state or political subdivision thereof for the treatment of persons with mental illness, and includes all hospitals, institutions, clinics, evaluation facilities, and mental health centers which provide treatment for such persons. State-operated mental health facility means a mental health facility operated by the department. State-operated mental health facility means a mental health facility operated by the department. So departments. I'm always talking about departments. So I guess I'm wondering, I got to go back and look at this act. To be honest, I haven't looked at the straight up definition for this, but department, does this include Department of Justice? I'd be willing to bet when I look it up, it does. We'll find out later, but 20 bucks on that one, friends. Let's find out. So mental health or development disability services or services means treatment or habilitation. So any services that you receive means treatment or habilitation. And habilitation means something to alleviate you of some sort of developmental disability. Is this familiar? When you go to a court, do you receive correctional services? You didn't injure or harm anyone in a lot of cases, so if there was no injury or harm, you can't be punished. Therefore, they apply correctional services. Jail is a correctional service. Prison is a punishable application. So when we go to the county jails and whatnot, this is simply to correct your behavior, your social disability. And is the court providing those services? I would say yes, but I'll leave that, for you to decide. So let me see, we're gonna scroll down to understand what is a facility. Did I pass that? Sorry, guys. There it is. Facility means an entity that received assistance under Title 4, Title 11 of the Act, and provided a community service assurance. Anyone receiving assistance under the Social Security titles, those specific to, are considered to be a facility and a community service because they provide community services, community assurance services as well. The Department of Health and Human Services provides assurance to the agencies below them. Look it up. I'm not going to pull everything up. It's a lot of work, but go ahead and check for yourself. The Health and Human Service Department provides assurances for human subject research. You can look that up too. That's what they do, and that's why they opened up a department to protect people that are being researched for human subject research studies. Okay, so they provide assurance. That's a facility, and now we know facilities are inclusive of these mental health providers. So very, very scary to think, in my opinion, but that's what it is. You can't make this stuff up. Here it is right in front of us, right? So let's go back. So mental health facility is any institution or facility or section thereof. So basically they're saying there, anyone who receives those Social Security title funds and operate both in the state and public subdivisions and apply treatment to persons with mental illnesses. That's pretty much everybody in government, I would say. Because if you look at the title funds, Social Security title funds, you will find that there's funding for lawyers, there is funding for courts, there is funding for children, families, and the courts that serve them. And what do? They provide you with referrals to services for people with disabilities. Very curious indeed, but here we are. So I just wanted to really show you a broad overview of how I've kind of, through my own research, have come to some of these theories that I've been sharing with you throughout this time. I want you to see that government operates on science, the science of natural law. So if we can look at a man's predicted behavior, we can prevent crimes. We can prevent abuses. And that's everything you're involved in when you're in these courts, is preventative in nature through analytics. Okay, so they use all these different people to give these evaluations and report on your behavior, and then they apply analytics to determine if you might impose a risk to the public, but not just physically, mentally, socially, economically. And if they believe that somehow your disability imposes some sort of harm to the economy, you are going to have to correct that behavior through these particular services. Isn't that special? But why not just tell us? This is a preventative measure. It's also risk management. Therefore, it leads us to the state supplemental insurance, not Social Security insurance. State supplemental insurance is put into place to help the state's citizens with any of these mental disabilities. It is designed to protect Social Security insurance from getting claims of disability against it. So if we don't try to help you or to correct your social disabilities or help you stay on track economically and socially, it may pose a risk to you claiming the disability on Social Security, whereas the Social Security then will have to give you those monthly checks, and we don't want that. So instead, what we'll do is we will provide you with a guideline, a fiduciary responsibility in each part of your life by which, if you fall outside the scope of that, we can help you to get back on track by correcting your behavior and educating you how to behave better so that you don't tap that money. Because if we just flat out say you're disabled somehow, then you'd be entitled to disability from Social Security. And that's why they hide it. That's why they don't want you to see it. But there's a lot more to it than that, of course. But, this is just the overview. I'm not going to get too involved or deep into it. I wanted to show you this just so that you understand where I'm coming from as far as it being natural law practice and, science. So all of these courts, or whatever you want to call them, if you think about what happens in there, and I can tell you from my own experience, I had to kind of walk through it. After learning all this, I had to walk through it again to see if I could spot it, if I was correct. So the first thing that happens, you get involved with an officer. In my particular case, I was arrested for something that has nothing to do with the law. How does that happen? So officer says I failed to identify. So I failed to furnish an identification. This is not something I'm being charged with, but I was arrested for it. But he can't charge me with it in the court because it doesn't exist. There's no law that obligates me to identify. This doesn't make sense. But even worse than that, the next thing is a charge. My actual criminal charge is that I furnished a false identification. So, plead the Fifth, protect my Fourth Amendment and my privacy rights, as I am afforded to not only under the Constitution, but statutory rights as well. So, interesting to say, how am I getting arrested? Well, that's because I don't need to break the law to be arrested. If they evaluate me for having some sort of disability, they now can also take me into custody in order to do further evaluations and apply correctional services to help me with that little problem. And that's how we're seeing so many false arrests, because this is really what they're trying to do. It's disorderly, in other words. If my social behavior if it leads to other people sharing in my belief, if I'm able to persuade other people that furnishing identification is not necessary, then people will lose faith in the protective order of the police. And if they lose faith, we may have chaos. So I've been trying to understand, how do people keep getting arrested on false pretenses? And this is why. So now I have this social defect or this disability. And because of that dependency I have for the police officers to protect me, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're protecting me from myself. They're protecting me from conducting myself in a way that harms the public. Because if we don't nip this social disability in the bud right now, it could lead to injury, it could lead to damage, it could lead to harm. So we need to protect her from allowing her emotional disturbances to lead her down the path of destructive behavior, because we know it'll always lead to that. So this is how they protect you. It has nothing to do with protecting your constitution rights. It has nothing to do with protecting your body. It is about protecting your entitlement rights. So we know that if you have a social disability, automatically you are entitled to receive services as a benefit from the state. We have to make sure you have access to it. We have to make sure that you get it because you need it. And that's what they're protecting in the back end, even the judges. So when you come in and a police officer has, say, called you a sovereign citizen, being called a sovereign citizen means not only that they think you're a terrorist, but it also means then that you have a social disability. You are not thinking inside of the box like the rest of your community members. You're thinking outside the box. That makes you different. It makes you an outcast. We want to help you with that. So that's why the police always are telling you, or not always telling you, but that's why we keep seeing this occur, where every time someone has an encounter with the police and disagrees with what they're saying, it's an automatic go-to for police now. They'll say, are you a sovereign citizen? You're a sovereign citizen. And that's because this is their evaluation of your behavior, that they can now say you need correctional services to help you with that social problem. That's all it is. Not real rocket science, but they sure aren't disclosing it though, are they? But yeah, so there's a lot to this. I mean, you could pull up several of the different mental health acts. And like I said, I'm not going to, bore you to death by reading it. I just really wanted to get you involved in it so that you can start thinking on your own, because that's how we level the playing field, okay? So as you can see here under these acts, it tells you training is required for all officers, not just for new recruits or for police officers who specialize in mental health. Police officers need to be retrained on an ongoing basis. Training needs to be conducted by all stakeholders, service users, mental health professionals, and the police. Specialized workshops are also delivered on the perspectives of service user groups. This is telling you police train on how to observe and evaluate your mental health. That's why there's so many unlawful arrests out there, because it's not always about the fact that you broke the law. Over the last 4 decades, the deinstitutionalization of people with mental illness from psychiatric hospitals into their communities has coincided with increased contracts with the criminal justice system. What? Local communities and specifically law enforcement were not equipped with necessary training resources and community connections to effectively manage individuals experiencing severe mental health symptoms. As first responders, operating without these critical resources, law enforcement officers defaulted to the tools at their disposal: arrest and jail, to keep the public safe, So when they say protect and serve, they ain't talking about you. But this is basically from, what's his name? Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter had done away with psychological institutions where people were confined in these psychiatric hospitals, because he felt it was cruel. And so he felt that as long as a psychiatric issue didn't display violence or some sort of risk of harm to the public, that these people could still be utilized for their labor skills. They could still be productive members in the community and society, so that they could, give their labor over as a benefit to the state. So why put them in a place where they're useless and wasteful? Let them roam amongst the community, because they're not dangerous, and they can actually benefit the community because they will help the economic system through their labor. And that's what we have here today. So after the deinstitutionalization, we have come up with a different plan, a different way of reorganizing things so that if you have a mental defect, as long as it's not violent in nature, as long as it's not going to harm the public, we'll let you have limited liberty amongst your peers. That's why we don't have freedom. That's why we have liberty, right? So now we have this opportunity to walk around the communities. You might be on probation, you might have court supervision to make sure that you don't become socially, what's the word, socially unrested or disorderly over a certain period of time. That way they can determine that their application of education was effective. So that's why they supervise you or probate you. It's because it's just to make sure that the court's application of correctional prescription worked. And the science that they collect from that shows that it betters the outcome of the individuals who have gone through this process, because we can now see that they did not re-offend. You didn't re-offend because of your beliefs. You didn't re-offend because you were threatened, coerced, and scared. Like, there's no way around that. Like, would you really go through these things if there wasn't a gun? Probably not, and they know it. So if we look at the criminal justice system, you understand that all police and some of the social workers and stuff have to go through criminal justice courses in college. And that's basically what the criminal justice courses teach, is how to use psychology to determine one's intent and observe their behavior, but also how to bend them to your will, how to express authority in a way that makes them consent without really showing that you did it coercively or violently. They learn this. It's kind of crazy. So this is just, like I said, a real good overview of how I've come to some of the things I've come across. I hope it helps you guys to learn, or to at least to encourage you to learn government at this point. And, let me know what you think by making comments below. Click the like button. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed, because we're going to get deeper into this as we go along. And make sure to hit the bell so that you're notified when we put up more videos. Again, this is just scratching the surface, my friends. There is a lot of depth to this. So I'll keep teaching as long as you keep learning. And hopefully this is beneficial for you to understand things better so we can level the playing field. Have a great day, and we will see you soon.